Your song selection on Sunday was never supposed to carry the weight of worship, but if we're honest, most of us lead like it does. On this episode of the Worship Online podcast, where we help worship leaders like you and me lead better every week, I talk with Heath Michael Bottomly, who led worship for years and then became a senior pastor, and now he oversees creative teams at his church while directing the Experience Conference. We get into why handing off the stage hurt more than he expected, what Romans 12 actually says about worship, and the weight that you were never supposed to carry. I think it's going to challenge you. Let's go. Heath Bottomly, man, welcome to the Worship Online podcast. You doing all right
Keith.
today?
It's good. It's still kind of I'd say not chilly outside, but
Okay.
it's probably in the I'd say mid 90s. So
Okay.
we haven't broken 100.
You're
so
in
it's
Arizona.
cool.
For people that
Yeah.
don't know, you're in Arizona.
Yeah.
So
We had a
mid-90s.
run of like 110, 115 there for a while. So it's cooled down to the 90s. So,
Wow.
Yeah.
Yeah, we don't.
High
it's
90s,
not-
but still 90s.
Yeah, a little bit different than the East Coast where I'm at. So
Just a little bit,
I'm
probably.
so glad you're joining us today, because I think as worship leaders and just in general ministry people, we probably have a lot that we can learn from you and your story. And people probably know mostly about you because you're the director of the Experience Conference, which is coming up here in
Really
September. Very soon, which, people probably see that everywhere. So a lot of people listening are probably going to be attending that. But also people maybe don't know you're the executive pastor at Pure Heart Church in Arizona, where you were previously the senior pastor, right?
I was actually senior pastor at we actually did a co-senior pastor at New Life Church.
New Life Church, okay, yeah.
Yeah, in Phoenix.
That's right, yeah.
And so was there
co-senior
for
pastor. And
was there for a while.
prior to that, worship leader. Mm-hmm. Right, so
Yeah.
you and you have a production company called Maven Productions, and so you have this wide range of ministry experience. But it did kind of start in the worship world, not too long ago, but a little while ago.
Decades ago. Yeah.
Can you take because mostly worship leaders, worship directors, worship teams listening to this podcast? Can you kind of go back in your story and what that was like, maybe your worship leading journey when you first got into ministry? What did you think ministry was going to look like?
Well, that's actually really interesting because right out of high school, I was basically gotten a presidential scholarship, which made my parents extremely happy because that's basically like you pick where you want to go.
Awesome.
And that summer between, I also had a job interview for a marketing opportunity right out of high school, which was bizarre. Even the company was going, we don't typically offer these positions to someone your age. And a team from Youth of the Mission that I'd gone on a missions trip with 2 summers previously had come to my church and did a Sunday night event. And so I was like, hey, how are you guys doing? And they're like, how are you doing? And we start catching up. And I'm like, so where are you guys headed? And they're like, we're going up the West Coast and then across Canada. We're speaking in churches, meeting in schools, all that kind of stuff. And they smiled and they said, you should come with us. I'm like next time
Now?
you do this? And I said, we leave on Wednesday. You should come with us. And I thought that was the stupidest thing I had ever heard. And they said, just tell me you'll pray about it. And like an idiot, I said, yeah, I'll pray about it. And that Wednesday morning, we were rolling out of the parking lot and on a 3-month adventure that I'm like, how did I say yes to this? And then I ended up spending the next couple of years in Youth of the Mission, ended up being a part of the Atlantic Games outreach that Youth of the Mission was invited by ACOG, the Atlantic Committee for Olympic Games, to be a part of. There had 5,000 young adults from around the world that were part of this team. And I came back home to Phoenix and was just, what do I do with all that? And we had done some band things while I was in Youth of the Mission, but the first time I'd ever done anything like that. And my old junior high leader reached out to me in the middle of nowhere and invited me to come speak at their church. And they were now the youth pastors for. And so I came out and talked about my missions experience and everything, and it went really well. There were a lot of kids who were challenged to jump into ministry, and I got a call the next week going, "Hey, I see your band is playing out. What are you guys doing?" I'm like, "Well, we started this thing. We're playing on circuit around town, a lot of pubs and bars and things like that." I'm like, "We're just writing music and having fun." And they said, "Would you be interested in actually leading the youth music for church?" And it took me a minute because I'm like, like the songs that we sing before the message, and it hadn't dawned on me. I'm like, I guess we could learn some of those, and yeah, we could jump in and do that. And so ended up doing that one weekend, had a blast, and met some of the team there. And over the next couple of weeks, they invited me to come on and join the team and be the guy who led that. That ended up being Pure Heart Church.
Yeah. Wow.
30 some odd years ago.
Insane.
And so I became the youth worship director. That jumped me into a whole bunch of other things where suddenly, like there was a young adults church that had started on Thursday nights that the Southern Baptists had launched. And they all looked at it and said, "This is not sustainable." It's a small group for another church. And we went, "We're just going to try it." It blew up to 300 people meeting on a weekly basis on Thursday nights, and the average age was 24. And it just suddenly it's like this actually became a position, a thing that I'm doing because they invited me to come on full time.
Wow.
But still, this is all very new. This is right at the late 1900s, as my team likes to call it, stepping into 2000, and to the point where even this church or whatever, they were like, I think we need a website. And they're like, do people actually even use websites for churches, And so I learned HTML and built us one. So
America
it just kind of tells you the age that this is all at.
Yeah. Yeah.
But so there wasn't an intentional thing of like, I'm called to be a worship pastor. I didn't even know that term. Basically, what it was I knew that God had called me to ministry, whether I wanted to fight that or not. And this just happened to be the open door that was in front of me that felt like it was a fit. And so one door kept leading to another. We made the joke, I'm about to turn 50 this year, which is crazy.
Okay.
And for everyone listening, they go, no, of course, you can't be a year over 49. But I joke around just going, I never interviewed for any of these positions. They were just opportunities that God allowed me to step into. And so I ended up at New Life and had been on their worship pastor for maybe 10 years. And the senior pastor retired, and the teaching pastor and myself stepped into a co-lead pastor, senior pastor role.
Okay.
And did that for 4 years. There was a horrible falling out between board leadership and even between the two of us as co-leads.
Wow. To
where I was like, one of those points in ministry that I'm sure everyone's been at where you just go, I don't want to do this anymore. Yeah. This sucks. I don't want any part of it. And that's when Dan Steffen, who the senior pastor at Pure Heart, who I had actually worked with 30 years before, he had actually come on the team as the associate pastor the week that I was taking another job. And I remember coming into his office and saying, hey, and he was like, dude, I love Sunday night because as a youth worship guy, I got to come in and lead big church on Sunday night. And he was like, I loved it. It was so great. I'm so looking forward to working with you. I'm like, this is my last week. But
it's going to be a great week, though.
It's going to be awesome. And then you're going to remember this forever. So, but we stayed in touch over those 30 years. And so he actually walked me through a lot of what the explosion that happened at New Life. And coached our team through it, coached the board through it and everything. And when I stepped away from there, he said, so what are you doing? And I'm like, well, I'd had an indie record label that I owned, had done some stuff in music business. And I was like, I think I'm just going to do a production company. And he said, how about you come and take a look at what we're doing here, and if you could consult for Pure Heart for 3 months. I thought that was genuine, but he actually had an agenda and a plan. And 3 months later, he offered me a position to give oversight as the pastor over what we now call creative teams, which is worship, technology, media, and communications. I skipped a whole part where I had started attending Experience Conference years before that. They asked me to run their marketing, and then they had asked me to come on and direct the conference, which was amazing. And I said yes to, brought my team in. And so that all leads me to kind of what I'm doing now, where now I'm the one of 3 executive pastors on the team, and in charge of strategy, next steps, and then still all the creative departments, and then team up with the next gen team and things like that. So
back to your roots of youth worship, next gen team.
Yeah, and now just basically get to pave the way for all the team members to be able to run, and which I love doing. And so I know that seemed like a lot, but that was very much in a nutshell.
No, I love it. And I definitely want to break some of that down. Can you go back to that moment when you were kind of maybe handing off worship leading? Was that tough, or did you always view it as just the expression that you were doing at the time?
Well, I had a great mentor, a guy named Gerald Furco, and he was the worship pastor at a church called North Hills, and we did recording stuff together. And I remember that I can't talk. I remember him sitting with me, and I asked him a thing. I'm like, because he had told me his history with, he went through all the worship wars, as they called them, between traditional and contemporary.
Blended, yeah.
And I said, what would you do different? And he looked at me and he paused and he said, I fought so hard to own the stage during my ministry time and everything. He's like, that when the next generation was coming up, I held onto it really hard.
Wow.
He's like, because he was like, the amount that I went through, and he's like, finally I could stepped into it and was like, now I can lead. And he said, if I could do it again, he's like, I would have handed off the stage a lot sooner. And that stuck with me. I'm in my 20s, hearing that. Before I even had the opportunity to jump into being a senior pastor position role, ministry role, I had already started in my 30s, had taken that to heart, and had actually started handing off the platform to other people. And I thought it would be easier. Initially, I was like, well, that's not a big deal. I'm going to give them I'm going to give them opportunities that I had, or even better opportunities than I had. But so much of my quote unquote success in ministry, the things that people were calling me to talk about, or the conferences I was asked to speak at, or, any of these things, were all around the position of worship ministry. And suddenly, what platform am I speaking from? I didn't realize that it mattered that much to me. But seeing that not be there, I wrestled with that. That was hard. And I think that's part of the unwritten element that people don't even really realize or think that won't affect them about the platform, especially things that are the arts, because they connect on a deeper level spiritually.
Identity level.
Yeah. You're able to actually speak into people's lives in a way that but in a way that doing a sermon or everything like that, it hits differently. And so had no idea how much you would miss that impact in even that position. So it was hard, and it's a lot easier now. It's just like I'm in rotation to lead worship. I tell them it's once a quarter.
Yeah.
But this last run or whatever, it was 6 times in 3 months, or whatever. But most of the time I'm like, pump the brakes, I'm like, I'm good. I don't need to do it, But it's still one of those things that every now and then comes back like, man, that was such a big part of my life.
Yeah.
Is.
Yeah. What I love about it, you didn't just shift from worship leading to, and I was talking to somebody the other day, worship leaders now are like, oh, I don't want to lead worship anymore. I'm going to go do real estate, or, they're like, I'm going to go do some leadership coaching for businesses, executive, whatever. And you didn't do that. You shift, and clearly you have a lot of those types of leadership, that leadership bent and gifts and abilities that have been developed, but you just kind of expanded your circle in ministry, right? You didn't just go to something completely different. What would you say is that you've learned about ministry being bigger than maybe what happens inside a job on staff at a church? Because now you're in this kind of dual role where you still are on staff at a church, but you also have these other things going on. What's that balance like for you? What have you learned?
I don't know if you've seen the Godfather movies, but Godfather 3 has this moment where Pacino's like, just when I thought I was out, they pulled me back in. It's to a point, and not in a negative way.
Yeah, that's true.
Well, it can feel like that. Ministry is something that it's one of those things where you don't get it out of your blood. You can't clock out. It's a part of who you are. And as believers, honestly, no matter what we do, we are all called into ministry. It's who. Now, for ministry, that might be that your air conditioning company is your ministry. How you interact with your neighbors is ministry. But when it's within the arena of what we traditionally know of as ministry within the body, within connecting with believers and as an organized element, it's one of those things that I could not shake it. No matter where I ended up, it was something that was a part of who I was. And so I would tangent over here or whatever, but really it was just bringing me back to another arena. And so all I've done is basically darted around within this big playing field that God placed me in. And I think sometimes we don't view, when we view worship or we view ministry as a role, it becomes something we tell ourselves that it's something that we can walk away from. In the same way when people talk about marriage, but they talk about divorce a lot, or like it's something that is a common word in their vocabulary, it becomes an option. And so depending on how you view marriage will tell you how open you are to walking away from it. In the same way with ministry, how your view is around ministry, if you see it as a role, if you see it as a job, if you see it as a something that you can climb the ladder of, then it's also something that you can go, I think I'm done with this season. And in my head and in my heart, it was, even though there were times where I'm like, I don't want to do this, that was much more of I am pushing away, trying to push away from something that I know is entrenched and is placed specifically in my heart. Operating, though, within the knowledge of knowing how deep it is, I look at it and go, there wasn't ever any chance that I would end up doing something outside of this in some way. It's too ingrained. I would be miserable probably, and I have been. I've tried and I've been successful at other things, but it's not as fulfilling. And so that's probably a long answer to what you asked, but
that's encouraging just to me personally, having, because 24, 25 years being on church staff, it's the only job I've ever known. And of course I'm like, I wonder what this would be like. And over time it's just like, I'm not doing this anymore. I'm literally never doing church staff again. And then somehow God brings me back in and gives me more opportunities, and it's all just circled around. And so man, I appreciate what you're saying so much. Let's talk about Experience Conference, right?
Yeah.
Experience Conference, big conference. Everybody's probably heard of it, down in Orlando. How does your ministry experience shape how you're helping form Experience Conference?
Well,
sorry, let me say it again.
Yeah.
It is ministry. How does your church staff and leadership experience help shape Experience Conference?
totally.
Yeah.
I got where you were going. So, but yeah, no, that makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
I think one of the things that really has been helpful, you've probably heard this a lot in churches and everything, going, well, is this business or is it ministry? And I've always been of the mindset of going, the best business principles are biblical principles. Just read through Scripture and how people are with their decision making, how they are with just doing the right things for the right reasons in the right way, being clever, being creative, all of these things.
Yeah, for sure.
And so that's never been something that I've separated out. I'm like, if it's you can do the right things and make the right calls, and that is very biblical, and that is actually, it's very ministry oriented. And so that element, being able to balance that within a church organization, has served really well in how we've done Experience Conference, because in the same way that some churches will operate in, we'll jokingly call it like a small church mindset, which is, it's like you kind of make decisions on a personal level, and it's like maybe not with the end in mind, and it's like, well, what do we want to do today? It surprises me in some organizations, decision making is made the same way. And so stepping into the role at Experience Conference, we all just sat around the room and unpacked this thing of going, guys, we are going to make sure that what we have been entrusted with, we are going to steward this really well, which means we're going to leverage it really well. And we're going to do everything within our power, within the creativity that God has graced us with, to make sure that we're doing everything we can to make this the best thing that it can be. And that ability to handle the ministry aspect, or what we traditionally call ministry, and the logistics and the responsibility, the stewardship of the organization, has really shifted what we've been doing in Experience for this will be 5 years since I stepped in the role. And our structure, our systems have gotten tighter. And yet at the same time, once we did that, suddenly we found that we had a lot more freedom and margin in what we were able to do, which is huge. And so we're at that stage right now where we're looking at what it would look like to expand. We're having some cool conversations with how to replicate this organization and this ministry beyond what we've been doing for the last 15 years. And we're excited because now we have the systems in place to be able to support an extension and a restructuring for expansion in a way that I don't think we were geared up for before.
That's awesome. Let's go back. Let's reverse it now and say, what have you learned there that you think applies to church? Because so I've been having this conversation multiple times recently where we have labeled worship leader, the role, as saying, churches say, we need a worship leader, or we're looking for a worship leader. And what they mean is someone that can sing, play an instrument, carry the room's attention, lead a team of people, be the lead vocalist, organize people, develop people, and empower people, and know technology and all these different things. And that doesn't just come right overnight. What do you think you've learned with Experience Conference, leading teams, and maybe even at the church, that would apply to worship leaders who maybe are great with music and great leading a rehearsal and on the platform, but they struggle with the systems, the strategies, the development? Yeah.
Well, I think you know this, and there's a lot of systems and there's a lot of techniques that can be taught. You can learn. It's amazing. Human mind can learn a lot of things. And what I have found, though, is that there's certain characteristics and personality markers that can be developed, but for some people, they're just not natural.
Yeah.
Or they're not at that point. And when it comes to something like Experience Conference, I found that there are a lot of people who stepped into roles without the full knowledge of what that role would require of them, or if they were in a place where they had the skill set, personality, calling to step into that role, they were picked because of elements of talent. I was in that generation where churches suddenly started looking at people who led bands because Christian music had taken off, was getting bought out by mainstream music everywhere. And suddenly all these guys who were band leaders for different bands were getting offered jobs at churches to be worship pastors without actually ever knowing what it meant to be a pastor. Or you had churches who thought they were hiring a pastor when they were actually hiring a weekend warrior. And weekend warriors are great, and I know a lot of them, and they're actually some of the best people you can get involved in your team. Or they were hiring a worship artist they were hiring an artist in general more than they were hiring a pastor. And I'm also of the mindset going, get as many artists in your community as you possibly can. They are vital to, I believe, the growth and expansion of your ministry. But if you think you're getting one and you're getting the other, what ends up happening is this gap and this chasm between leadership or the senior pastor in this role, and with all these different expectations and limitations. And what I found at Experience that's really helped me with church ministry is really digging into the differences, the different types of people who serve within worship ministry. You have to intentionally get to know who they are before you just drop people into roles, because we will drop people into roles based on need, based on availability. And sometimes we'll do, hey, they're a great guy, good guy, loves the Lord, and then we set them up to fail in what we're asking them to do. And then it becomes their fault. And I've seen that play out time and time again in conversations with people at Experience Conference who are coming in and they're going, I am done. I can't do this anymore. And learning from what we've discovered to apply to our teams at church and go, I want to make sure that I'm not perpetuating that problem, and whatever I can do to make sure that we're not feeding it and inadvertently doing more harm than we intend.
Has there ever been a point for you along the way that you recognize maybe empowering somebody was actually the ministry versus simply doing it yourself? And maybe it would have been easier. I'm guilty of this, where it's like, it'll just be easier if I do it myself. It might even be better if I do it myself, but it's not the end goal of ministry is not that. Do you have any stories about that?
Well, so when I was, stepping like in the 20s, stepping into these things and not really knowing what they were, when I started seeing other people talk about what their ministry position was, in my head, I started developing this thing of going, man, it would be cool to be in one of those types of positions where I could call the shots. Man, it would be really cool to have that type of authority where when I step into it, I can enact my vision, Yeah.
I will bless everyone with my amazing talent. Yeah.
God's given me so much. I can't wait till I can call the shots and tell everyone else what to do, because that sounds right. But it's what, in some way or another, I meet a lot of people that's their view of leadership, is they think when I step in, then I can call the shots, I can run the show. And they do that even from a humble position of going, I feel like God's given me this, and then when I get this opportunity, I'm going to run with it. And I have found in leadership that it is much more the opposite. I have found that most of my time in leadership has been best served when I am actually removing roadblocks for my team, when I'm actually releasing them to be able to run. And it ends up monopolizing so much of my energy going, okay, I got to make sure this is cleared, make sure this is done. But we're able to carry so much more. If it was just me being the one doing that, leading in that way, the ideas, what we would do would only be as big as me. And I'm not that big of a guy. But if I can release a team of people, empower others, and even during that time period or whatever, there's a time in there where it's like, this is actually taking twice as much work for me to train you or to develop you or to empower you, because it would be easier if I just did it. Long term, though, the organization, the ministry is exponentially larger on what we can carry when it's all of us. when I've got a team that's empowered, that believes that they are equipped, that knows that it's okay to fail, that knows that it's okay to try things, and knows that at the end of the day, the best idea wins. We're not competing against each other. Our ideas may be competing against each other, but we're doing it because we're leveraging it for the kingdom. That is a much bigger thing that we can be a part of than if it was just me surrounded by a bunch of people doing exactly what I want them to do. And so that, man, I love that. And I think the more we can shift gears to where we can leverage our leadership to embolden and to empower and encourage others to run, the better I think we'll find ourselves 20 years down the road going, wow, God, how did you take us here? And it's going to be because you let go. You know?
Yes. Wow. What's the cost of, maybe you personally, but so many multiple avenues? Because I'm someone who has a lot of ambition. I have a lot of ideas. I'm never short on ideas. I could give you 10 since our conversation started today of things. Oh, we could do, but what's the cost for you, maybe for a team, of all of these different things, seeing ideas, pursuing visions and strategy and all these different things?
Well, I've got a good friend of mine, Aaron Rice, who's a songwriter, and I love the fact he said, you've got to write 100 bad songs to write a good one. And the cost of doing things this way is that there's a lot of things that'll pop in your head, a lot of ideas that you have to hold open-handed, and which is hard because our ideas, the things that we create, they're our babies. And so we have to actually learn going, no, they're not the same thing as our children. They are part of a creative process. And so I have to be able to let go of those things, even though I'm like, man, this would be so good.
Yeah.
I think that's one of the things that's really hard to let go of. But I think there's something even deeper entrenched, is that the cost for leading in this way is the very clear understanding that I will be forgotten very easily, and which your knee-jerk reaction to that is like, I don't like that. I mean, you don't. That's not something that no one wakes up and going, man, I would love it if everyone forgot about me tomorrow.
Right, it's like Matthew. I think it's going to be Matthew, Mark, Luke, John, Heath. Right, like you're like, I'm right up there on the Mount Rushmore of Jesus followers.
We're in our we have this story in our head where we're one of the main characters.
That's,
it's like,
wow.
Well, you think about it. What was it? Spider-Man: No Way Home. I mean, that's the part at the end of the movie that breaks your heart, is that everyone forgets him. And then you have this whole new movie that's the repercussions of being forgotten. It's a fear within us, but if you're doing this whole backwards, upside down kingdom thing, you have to get comfortable with the fact of going, if I do this well, and if I'm successful, then I can fade and disappear very easily, and it's got to be, and I got to be okay with that. And I'll tell you, even right now, even saying it hurts a little bit, but I know it's true, because this whole thing isn't, the people that I want to remember me are my kids. I want their lives to be impacted by what I did and didn't do. And if I'm leading in ministry really well, then I have replicated myself and empowered and lifted up other people, because that's the infinite game. That is, I'm not here to just win my role. I'm not here to just win my moment. I am here for us to infinitely win, generation after generation, the long term of this, to stay in the game, to stay in this thing for the duration until Jesus returns. And that takes a different mentality. If I'm in it for me to win right now, then when I'm gone, it crumbles when I'm not there. And the most successful leadership I've seen is when the person is gone and it flourishes. It continues to flourish. Tells me something about the leader who came before.
Yeah.
whatever their name was.
No one knows.
Yep.
Well, and back to what you said earlier about, this creative side of things, and I mentioned, identity. I think with creative people in ministry, ministry is hard because just any ministry, because we were created for this, right? This is something that's like soul level calling, and we're created to do this. And so when we have these ministry opportunities, we don't want to fail. We care about what we're doing, but then there's an easy way for it's just like a thin line where it crosses over into, maybe we're not about making it about ourselves, but the success and the failure does feed something inside of us. And then especially when your identity as a creative is wrapped up in what you're creating, right? And so you have a book called Unimaginable. Can you break that down a little bit, before we wrap up here, about how that plays out in creatives?
Well, the book itself is kind of, I don't want to say attacking, but really confronting. That's a better word.
Yeah, confronting, yeah.
Confronting the idea that people will go, oh, he's a creative, or I'm not creative, or we have relegated creativity to specific people, or the weird ones, things like that. But really reminding and diving into the fact that one of the first characteristics we know about God, the very first characteristic that we read about God in Scripture, is that he's creative. Mm-hmm. It's the fifth word in the Bible. In the beginning, God created. And we only know about his love. We only know about other aspects of his personality because he created. And all of us, every single person, is made in the image and likeness of God. And so one of the strongest characteristics of God, for some reason, I don't think it's an accident that culture has tried to remove that from everyone and, in a weird way, dehumanize our God-given identity.
Wow.
And I also don't think that it's an accident that imagination and creativity and faith are so closely intertwined. Faith is being able to believe something that you can't see, that you have to imagine it. You have to be able to creatively envision something to have faith for it, because it's not tangible in front of you. Hope is the same way in everything. And then we wonder why it's hard for us to have faith for things, because we don't know how to picture it. We don't know how to envision it, because somewhere along the line, someone stripped creativity out of us and imagination out of us, to where we no longer know how to dream for things. We go, no, I'm not a dreamer. But I'll tell you what, every single child at 3-4 years old is an imaginative dreamer. It's not like I wasn't born that way. No, you were.
Yeah.
Something either robbed you of it, or you gave it up freely along the way. And so Unimaginable is talking about really diving into our belief system. What are beliefs? How do we operate? What makes things? Why do we suddenly believe things a certain way? And then how does that impact the way we live out our lives? And then also just really dealing with the thing that terrifies us is that fear of failure. That's one of the reasons why so many of us stop creating or don't create, is because we're scared of the result.
Wow.
And really getting over that and going, or not, I don't know if we could fully get over that, but holding it more open-handed and going, it's okay. You are not the end all of all things. You are part of who you are is the fact that you get to create things, and maybe they don't work out the way that you thought they would. And that's not a failure. You wrote 100 bad songs in order to write a good one, and until every bad song that you write is also teaching you something. It's cultivating something. It's training the way that your mind works. Some of it is getting some of the stuff out of the way so that you can write the next one. And the more comfortable we get with that, the more we actually start living out the creative beings that God actually made us to be. We're, even to God, is like, hey, these guys are capable of a lot. You look at almost silly stories like the Tower of Babel, and this concept of, okay, they're creatively coming up with a way they're going to build a tower all the way up to heaven, and we look at that and go, idiots, and yet, I can almost imagine, we're like, can you believe these people, God? And God's like, yeah, we should probably put a stop to it before they actually do it.
Yeah.
Like, what are you talking about? They're not. That's impossible.
Yeah.
Not to God. God's actually going, no, that's how I created them.
Yeah. They're trying.
They're capable of doing this. We're the ones who say that we aren't.
I love it. Let's close with this, right? So worship leaders, worship teams listening, you've learned a lot. You're involved in a lot. What's the message that you have for worship leaders and worship teams today that you think would help them, and all the years and wisdom you've gained over time? What would you like to share with them? Sum it up in one thing.
Let's see. No, I'll actually just share something that's been over the last few years, something that's really hit home with me, is that when we talk about worship, our minds automatically go to the song set. It goes to the act of singing, and singing praise is huge. I mean, it is powerful, it is dynamic, and it is one of the core elements, I believe, of our interaction with God and how we interact as a community. And declaring truth to each other changes the atmosphere. Mm-hmm. But I think we have put so much of what worship is onto the shoulders of the act of singing, and it was never meant to carry that weight. Very few times in Scripture does it unpack and share what worship actually is. But I've always equated in my mind, because I've been taught this, that worship is the physical act of singing praise to God, which in Scripture, that's actually almost never communicated. Anytime it talks about worship, it is talking about a life lived ascribing worth to God. And so my encouragement to worship leaders is, what you do is important, what you do is powerful, but it is not the entirety of worship. In fact, it is simply an outpouring, an outcropping of a life that is worshipful. Because if you look at Romans 12, very famous passage where it says, give your bodies as a living sacrifice. This is what it means to give actual worship, true worship. And we stop there, but if you go through the rest of Romans 12, the rest of Romans 12 actually unpacks what a life of worship looks like. And it starts describing how you view yourself, how you view others, how you interact with others. Mm-hmm. All of that is actually what it's calling worship. And so as encouragement, and probably also a challenge to worship leaders, I'd go, what you do is important. But when you talk about worship, you do not carry the weight of people engaging and leading out their own worship in their lives on your shoulders, nor were you ever supposed to carry that weight. Your song selection on the weekend was never supposed to carry the weight of worship. When people are like, I can't wait to worship, you do that now. And not just sing a song. Do what Romans 12 says and be hospitable to others. Don't think of yourself too greatly. Live at peace with others. Engage. Those things are all what you're doing, is you're saying that I do value God, and what he's asked me to do, I'm going to live it out. And so you're showing that he is worthy. And that's worship. And what we do on the weekends is an outpouring. It's an overflow of lives that are actively living that out.
I love it. I think you model that so well, just how you're living a life of ministry in all these different avenues. And thanks for sharing all this today. Experience Conference coming up in September, and I'm sure you're going to meet a lot of the listeners there. And looking forward to following your story and rooting you guys on as you kind of expand what Experience Conference is doing and make a bigger impact on the kingdom and in the world of worship. And so thanks for joining us again today.
Thanks. And Keith, thanks so much for the invite, man.
Yeah, man.
It was an absolute honor and privilege when you reached out on Instagram, and it was just like, hey, I'd love to connect. I'm like, Really? Why? No. But hearing a little bit about what God's been doing in your life, and just even before hearing about your kids and everything like that, man, it's exciting to see what God's doing with you and what He's doing in your ministry. And I'm excited for you, and I can't wait to hear more about how it continues to unfold.
Thank you, man.
Yeah.
Good to talk.
Appreciate it.